Hello, everyone. So that I will just pay your attention to the little bit the technical process. Who speaks English, please choose this button below, this must be, you must choose the English one, and from Georgian participants, please choose the Georgian, and don't switch after, just keep it for one language, and interpreter will do his job. Thank you for joining, for having you all today on our discussion. Our event, as you know, is organized in the framework of the International Network of Judicial Reformers with partnership of independent lawyers and with support of USAID Rule of Law program. So the discussion will today continue 1 hour. The topic of the discussion is very relevant for nowadays, and as integrity checks of judges has become the matter of the discussion in many countries who are struggling for judicial independence. Our discussion will cover varied experiences of vetting, including pre-vetting of judges, periodic security checks for judges, and also full-fledged vetting. So for Georgia, this topic is very relevant. As you know, in October 2023, the Venice Commission recommended for Georgia to address judicial corporatism and self-interest in judicial council, which means that comprehensive reform of judiciary council should implement, and this can be related to the significant corruption allegations in Georgia judiciary system, as judges were sanctioned due to their involvement in significant corruption. And for the vetting, as you know, there can be different forms such as evaluation of professionalism, financial check, or connection with the secret services. But for Georgia, the European Commission recommended specifically to establish a system of extraordinary integrity checks with involvement of international experts, and to check and to make the integrity checks to the candidates who are appointed to the positions of judiciary, in particular High Council of Justice, Supreme Court, and Court Presidents. And today I have this great opportunity to moderate this process, our discussion webinar, and we have really brilliant speakers. We have თუ შეიძლება მიკროფონები რომ გამოვთოთ. Let me introduce them very briefly, as we have not very much time. Of course, they have very impressive brief biographies, but I will just highlight several points from their experience. Andrei Bozinovsky, legal expert, coordinator of guidelines of Judicial Vetting Work Group, assistant at the Department for Criminal Law, Faculty of Law, University of Zagreb, Croatia. He also serves as legal advisor at the Judges Association of North Macedonia. Dr. Grigor Zborgovsky has more than 15 years of professional experience as a judge in Poland and combines the practical approach with the academic experience since 2000, and doctorate in civil procedure. Since 2018, he worked as component leader in EU project in Albania, and since 2023 has become a component leader in EU-funded Rule of Law project in North Macedonia. And Herman von Heppel, a seasoned legal professional, has carved a distinguished career marked by leadership, legal expertise, and a commitment to judicial reform, currently serving as the chairperson of the Pre-Vetting Commission in Moldova. As you see, our speakers are very centered from this events. And first question will go and I address Dr. Grigor Zborgovsky, and I will ask our panelists after this question to add their opinion about this question too, if they want to add something. And Grigor, I want to ask you that is judicial vetting, how do you think, an effective method for addressing corruption? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here among such distinguished lawyers and experts. And to be honest, it's really hard to answer such a question within 10 minutes. I'll do my best to somehow systematize let me first explain how we approach the issue of understanding what vetting is before we go on further. Because exactly 2 days ago, I attended in Warsaw a meeting of OSCE ODIHR, a roundtable on vetting, or in fact, it was on alternative methods to the vetting. It attended, among others, by the president of International Association of Judges and other fantastic lawyers. It shows that the topic of the vetting is becoming more and more hot, more and more popular, and more burning, maybe even better than hot. So the question is what the vetting is. We, and by we, I mean me and my colleagues here who are as experts, led by Andrzej Bożynowski. That's the only one with a tie among us here, because he's the leader. So we divided it into full-fledged vetting. We call it full-fledged vetting. In the documents, you will find it as a vetting. Sorry, Andrzej, for this. Then, if you go through Venice Commission opinions, you will also find out that some countries at least attempted to introduce security vetting. And there is also the notion of a pre-vetting, which is not so clear, but my distinguished colleague Herman von Hebel will go deeper into that. So what is the vetting for all of us to understand? Vetting of judges is the full-fledged vetting, in other words, is an extraordinary reassessment of the whole judiciary. And it's a temporary measure, it's one-time hit, which serves to remove those of judges and prosecutors who do not fulfill certain criteria. It may be integrity check. It may be the issue of financial assets. It may be the issue of lack of skills as well. And what is symptomatic is that at the beginning, the vetting was used only in absolutely extraordinary circumstances, like end of the war and after the war and after the fall of Nazi regime in Germany. You had to go through the screening of those judges who were at service, which of them could stay in democratic society and serve the society. The same applies to the fall of communism. And with regard to the vetting after the fall of communism, the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe says this is what we call lustration. And quite a lot of post-communist countries, including Poland, where I'm from, went through lustration. Whether it was successful or not, I will not reveal the secrets. You will read it in the guidelines. But some countries still struggle with the issue. So this is what we say is typical situation for vetting. And that's how I discussed it with my colleagues in 2020 on a discussion panel in Doha. That was the judicial integrity. Now, what we see in the last years is the introduction of vetting, this full-fledged vetting, in case of corruption among the judges. And by corruption, we may mean the typical corruption. So the judges were accepting bribes. Therefore, they are not able to somehow explain where the assets come from. Or it is a political corruption. And so as for the first situation, I see here my colleagues among the attendees, my colleagues from Albania. So this is exactly the typical situation. The vetting, full-fledged vetting, absolutely, was introduced in Albania as a last resort due to the amount, due to the high level of corruption among the judges. And the high level of corruption, it results in a low trust to judiciary. And this is where it becomes problematic, because if we say that the low level of trust to the judiciary might be the reason for full-fledged vetting, then the question arises, what is this level? Because you have different surveys. In Albania, as far as I recall, the lack of trust towards judiciary before the reform was introduced in 2016 was declared by 85% of the society. So, in other words, the level of trust was really, really low. But in neighboring Kosovo, there were attempts to introduce vetting as well, while the mistrust to judiciary was declared by only 35% of the society. And now, when I'm in Macedonia, there was a survey a month or 2 months ago showing that the level of trust to the judiciary is declared by 1% of society. So there comes the question, what is the methodology of a survey? Because 1% is a statistical mistake. It might be -1. How is that possible? So what I'm trying to say is that there is a threat, or we should be aware that vetting is a very popular topic for the politicians, especially in pre-election period. So it's easy to say, we have problem with the judiciary, we have problem of mistrust to the judiciary, or to say we have corrupted judiciary, let's do the vetting. And then each and every new government may come up with the same idea. Let us introduce vetting, let's get rid of the corrupted judges, but maybe you will find out that they want to get rid of the judges who were nominated under the previous regime or previous government. So now we want our judges. And that's why it is very, very dangerous to have the vetting as an not extraordinary, not last resort measure. Every document which treats about either illustration or vetting says it's absolutely last resort, which may be introduced only when the existing tools are not sufficient. What does it mean, existing tools? Well, in each and every judiciary, we have performance evaluation of judges. It is either periodical evaluation every 3-5 years, depending on the seniority of a judge, or it is a performance evaluation when a judge wants to be promoted. But then you have the performance evaluation. You have the ethical rules. You have the disciplinary proceedings, which are separate from the ethical rules. Finally, if we are talking about the corruption in the basic meaning, you have criminal proceedings. So what we are trying to reach is get rid of the bad apples from the basket. So to take the individuals, to take the black sheep, if you prefer animals from fruits, and take them out and leave those who fit the system. Vetting goes through all of judges. So it might be justified, but only in extraordinary circumstances, when the level of corruption is such that you cannot find the proper people who would answer the old expression, who will judge the judges. Yeah, if you don't have people within the judiciary whom you can trust, that they would be objective, that they would be impartial. But at the same time, during this discussion in OSCE ODIHR, a question was posed to me exactly on my presentation, and that was up to the point. I think that was a colleague from Armenia. Is it enough to clean the judiciary only? Because if we talk about the level of corruption, then we are talking about the systematic problem in the society. So what I'm saying is that you cannot just take out the judiciary, clean it, and then put it back. Because if it's a systematic problem, the problem will repeat itself. It must be the change of mindset. It must be the preserving the ethical rules. It must be the training for judges, etc. I am slowly finishing because I can see the time is ticking, but I want to refer to the Albanian example because quite often those countries which would like to introduce the vetting, and I have a pleasure to write the opinions for OSCE ODIHR or for Council of Europe. So it is based on the Albanian example. And what I hear is some of my colleagues from within the judiciary say that was necessary. We had to get rid of those bad apple or black sheep or whatever you call them, and there would be no other way to get rid of them. At the same time, from so-called everyday people, you hear that at the beginning they were supporting the process very much, and then they got discouraged because it takes long, because it has to be very thorough. You have to follow the rights to fair trial. So it takes a long time. It takes a long. What is also important is that the vetting is not criminal proceedings. So you have people who were found to be corrupted within judiciary, and they are dismissed, but there are no criminal proceedings initiated against them. So when a person sees that such a person goes back to the courtroom with the back door as an advocate, well, then the trust towards the vetting process is diminished. The answer to your question, I don't have a good answer to your question, but I would say I can imagine situations in which the vetting is necessary. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind all those necessary measures you will have to take to preserve the rights of assessees, which may end up in a situation that it will not be successful. So the answer would be, and this is the outcome of my discussions with my esteemed colleague Herman, yes, but only in absolutely extraordinary circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Grigor. Of course, the vetting is an extraordinary measure, but it's very dangerous because government can always decide whether these measures they need to conduct vetting or not, as it is political will somehow. And really, it's not so easy to decide this question. So I will go to Herman to hear his opinion about this question. Please, Herman, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, also from my side, a great pleasure to be here. Also good to see well-known faces from Moldova participating this afternoon as well. So Vladislav, good to see you again. So I will be very careful because I know there is someone who is carefully watching my work every day, and he will definitely speak up when he thinks I am not saying the right things. It's always good to follow up on what Greg is saying, because we have had many discussions and we also have a agreement to disagree on a number of issues and an agreement to agree on a number of issues. To start with the latter, I think I agree with the yes, but is vetting effective? Yes, it can be. Sometimes it's necessary, but I think also you have to be extremely careful to identify the circumstances under which vetting can be useful or sometimes even necessary. If we look at Albania example, I think both the Venice Commission and also the European Court of Human Rights actually identified the fact that it was not only necessary, and it was not only useful, but it was really necessary to deal with the process of vetting in order to fight organized corruption and links between the judiciary and organized crime. But at the same time, also, it is disruptive because you're talking about whether judges can either be, in the case of pre-vetting, either be a candidate for the Council of Judiciary or the Council for Prosecutors. And of course, when you're talking about sitting judges, in case of a failure to meet the evaluation, it means that that person can no longer be a judge, therefore has to leave the position, and therefore the capacity to deal with cases will diminish. And that is definitely a problem that we see in Albania. My reaction to that would is to also take lessons learned from Albania. And I think the process with pre-vetting and vetting in Moldova is a more targeted one, by which not all judges go through that process. And I agree that that is the right way. And that you only focus on judges in certain prominent leadership positions. And then, you know, the High Judicial Council is the starting position, or the Superior Council of Magistracy, as it is called in Moldova, judges of the Supreme Court, judges of the Courts of Appeal. So you focus on those judges who are in leadership positions, and thereby once those positions are cleaned, so to say, the rest of the sort of self-cleaning system of the legal system can function. But again, it is disruptive by nature. But then also, and there is also sometimes the discussion I have with practitioners in Moldova is, what do you prefer as a practitioner, to either work in the legal system, but which you know that the substantial number of judges are not up to the ethical and financial ethical standards or integrity standards, or to work with only on a temporary basis with a lower number of judges, knowing that at least those judges that deal with cases actually do stand the high standards that are applicable for judges. And the answer that I mostly get is, I'd rather go for a temporary interruption and deal with judges that I have the trust in to deal with the cases by which a council appears before a court. But the whole process of vetting, pre-vetting, is always about finding the right balance between, on the one hand, the fundamental principle of respecting independence and impartiality of the judiciary, fundamental, recognized in the European Convention on Human Rights, recognized as a fundamental principle of the rule of law. But at the same time also, if you do see that there are fundamental problems with that functioning of the judiciary, then in those exceptional circumstances, and there we definitely agree, in those exceptional circumstances, vetting may be an effective tool. But then the question is how to do that, and that is more of a few practical aspects that I would like to focus on. I think the first thing I already touched upon is who to focus on. Are you going to focus on all judges? My advice to that would be, don't do that. it's too cumbersome, it takes too long, you lose the trust and you lose the confidence and the support that you had at the very early days, and because people see that it is tiring, it's too disruptive. Just focus on a limited number of key players in the judicial system. The rest will follow. The judiciary cannot be cleaned in just 1 or 2 or 3 years. That simply takes longer. It's unfortunate, but that is the reality. The standards. I often hear that it is also about the competence of judges and whatever, and that is not what, at least not how we in Moldova apply. We look only at the ethical integrity and the financial integrity of judges and also prosecutors. We do not look into whether judges are competent. That is really something for others to focus on. That is more the overall training and competence building, etc. National Institute of Justice, the training of judges. That is not something that a vetting process should focus on, or a pre-vetting process should focus on. It's also not about determining whether judges have taken right decisions in previous cases. Vetting is not a new or a fourth instance or third instance process. It is not about whether judges have taken particular positions and considered to be the politically right decisions or whatever. We stay away from that. We focus only on financial integrity. We focus on ethical integrity. And then how to do that? And that, I think, is a very important aspect. And then we're talking about the sources of information. And I must say that the practice in Moldova has demonstrated that the amount of and the different sources of information we were able to make use of was enormous. And that made us take a lot of time to go through all the materials that we collected, but also it gave us a very good basis to really come up with thorough decisions about whether or not candidates were ethical and had high financial and ethical integrity. We had access to a lot of public sources, like tax authorities, like integrity institutions, financial investigation units, the Secret Service as well, and the border police, but for example, also, and incredibly important, the cadastre, and also the organization that deals with the registration of cars. It's very typical, but most judges, when you talk about financial integrity, what you look at first is what kind of house do they have? What kind of car do they drive? It is very basic, but that is often where the most important pieces of information come from. And so access to that kind of information is incredibly important. But then also private information is incredibly important. Civil society organizations. Unfortunately, in Moldova, we have received information from civil society organizations, but we actually had expected a bit more than that. But I think it's definitely also for Georgia, if in Georgia there were to go a route about vetting or pre-vetting, organize civil society, make sure that they do provide information about the potential candidates for this process. But also, of course, investigative journalists. We have regularly made use of newspaper articles, etc., to come up with good questions about how to assess a particular candidate. And of course, also the public at large. As people who have been following our work know, we have public hearings, and I think they're very important to be public. And people can see the questions that we have, sometimes the difficult situation that we create for candidates to answer questions, to our sometimes very tough questions. And then last, and then I will really wrap up, last, what has been incredibly important is information from private banks. Without that information, we would not have been nearly as successful in our analysis of candidates. We were able to go back 15 years in bank statements, bank reports, bank information, and it has given us so much information about candidates. So it's the wide variety of these kind of sources that really make a big difference. So yeah, on the general big picture, is vetting necessary? Can it be useful? There is definitely a yes, but the conditions have to be right. But then also, once you take that decision to go into this extraordinary measure, it's really a one-in-a-lifetime thing. It should not be after each and every election a new process. It's a once-in-a-lifetime exercise. Then make sure that a commission that is going to do it has the right tools to do it right. There's nothing as frustrating to get the process started and not having the right tools in order to do it, because then 5 or 10 years later, you do have the same problems. So that is by way of my reflections. I saw Greg nodding so every now and then, so we do not always disagree with each other. That's good to see. But I think it's good to have those kind of, the principle perspective and the practical perspective getting together over here. And thanks again for being a part of this discussion this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Herman, for sharing your very practical experience with us, because you are in the center of this process. And really, I agree that vetting is an extraordinary tool, but it can change the system. It needs years, it needs a lot of effort to make judiciary, to make changes and to achieve some differences. And thank you so much. Thank you very much. And I will go to Andrei with a question, if he wants to add on these questions, his opinion, and also to answer how should the composition of the vetting mechanism be structured. Please, Andrei, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Keta, respected colleagues, dear friends, and thank you so much for Democracy Index Georgia for inviting the three of us here. It's really an honor to have a platform basically just to share the good news with you that the guidelines on judicial vetting will be soon published in January by the Seal Institute. It was an issue that we, honestly, we knew it existed 2023, but we knew that also a thorough legal or academic analysis were lacking. And basically what we did was basically put our minds together to develop a guideline, a resource, which is from judges, which is by judges, for judges, and policymakers and civil society organizations, basically to define what vetting is. First, I just want to add on the previous question that there is no vetting as an institute in all the international standards on judicial independence, or judicial transparency, on judicial accountability. You cannot find it. Because it doesn't exist. Vetting basically is something, is a process which was developed to address the window dressing reforms, which happened in post-transitional countries, that judicial self-governance, where it failed. Basically. However, whether or not Greg and Herman, and I learned a lot from these guys, just so you know that's during this process of drafting these guidelines. Now, first, distinction must be made. Vetting is not a lustration process. We all know the lustration processes are very bad, failed in most countries, and it was politically motivated processes just to get rid the system of persons who cooperated with previous regimes and committed human rights abuses. Also, when it comes to vetting, it is, as Greg and Herman said, it's structural. It's dependent on the situation the country is facing. There are three types of vetting. First type of vetting is pre-vetting, which is Herman's Commission, to put it more simply. It's a pre-vetting where you vet the members of the self-governing judicial bodies. That means the High Council of the Magistracy and the High Council of the Prosecution. The idea is to vet the self-regulating bodies and let them do their job in doing regular accountability measures for all the judges and all the prosecutors, and that is pre-vetting. Second type of vetting is security vetting, which in Europe has failed. It was experimental. It failed only in Croatia and Slovakia. In Croatia, there was an opinion from the Venice Commission saying that periodic security checks for judges by the security service not only is against Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, but Croatia failed to demonstrate that the judiciary is that corrupt that it needs such an extraordinary measure. In other words, they said that this measure is against everything judicial independence stands for. In Slovakia, also the involvement of the intelligence services was very high. They in several cases, there is a decisions of the Constitutional Court of Slovakia, where officers from the national services were present and writing the minutes, basically, of candidates for self-governing bodies or candidates for positioning for judges or prosecutors. And the Constitutional Court said that they have no business being into that room. Because if it's a judicial council, and judicial council can write the minutes, can promulgate the decision, and ask the questions to candidates. And the third type of vetting is what Greg and Herman were touching about. That's Albanian-style vetting, where we go after with the presumption that all the judiciary is corrupted. We go against all the judges, all the prosecutors. That type of vetting oftenly requires constitutional amendments because you go against the constitutional principle of irremovability of the judicial position. And what my colleagues said, you always must bear in mind, it is extraordinary, one-time, temporary measure. Those words must be like a Bible when those words are Bible basically when considering your vetting, because it is a very, very, very serious mechanism. And the principle of vetting is you go with a distrust against the judiciary. And when it comes to the case of Georgia, the opinion, Keta, basically the second opinion, which was published on 9th of October, Venice Commission uses words like addressing judicial corporatism, addressing clan-closed judicial councils, addressing I wrote several of these, persistent allegation of lack of integrity. If the Venice Commission wrote those words, basically, as Greg mentioned in Prague during our sessions for the guidelines, the thorough assessment is based for a country, the thorough assessment whether or not to choose vetting is based on this type of report. Usually, it is the European Union report or the United States Department of State reports about the situation of the judiciary. In the case of Georgia, to my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the Venice Commission is trying to give Georgia first alternative measures on how to address before considering vetting. Alternative measures are increased monitoring of the process of selection of judges and prosecutors, increased monitoring of the activities of the self-regulating bodies, and this is where it gets interesting, because Georgia is the first state where the Venice Commission says, if these alternative measures fail, then you can consider extraordinary integrity checks. And believe me, when something contains the word extraordinary, that is pre-vetting, and it's not vetting. Pre-vetting. That's what Herman is doing in concretely in Moldova. Extraordinary means that possibly you should consider adopting Moldovan-style pre-vetting only for the members of the High Judicial Council and High Prosecutorial Council as a preventive measure to vet those councils of the bad apples and let them do their job with regular accountability measures to all the other judges and prosecutors and so on and so forth. Yes, I have only one answer to the previous question. It was a very whether or not to choose vetting or not. It is a very difficult decision, but honestly, if issues cannot be addressed otherwise, it is a good mechanism. If we're talking about last resort, ultima ratio. if things can be addressed otherwise, then we should opt out for alternative measures and which are part of the regular system. Another thing about vetting: do not confuse vetting with regular accountability mechanisms such as asset declaration or reports evaluation you're sent to the judicial councils. That is not it. This is done by extraordinary ad hoc bodies which are not part of the regular judicial system, even pre-vetting and vetting. And because my second question, Keta, was about those bodies, allow me to answer it. Should a country decide to adopt vetting, then, depending on the type of vetting, comes the constitutional or legal amendments. In pre-vetting, you don't need constitutional amendments, only amendments on the law on judicial council or law on courts, basically. Basically, when you create these commissions, you must follow the recommendations, of course, and standards of the European Courts of Human Rights. You must have an appeal body, and usually in pre-vetting proceedings, the appeal bodies are existing courts in the country. Usually, it's the Supreme Court, constitutional courts, depending on how you're gonna set the pieces. But that vetting bodies are usually mixed. Even in vetting and in pre-vetting, they're mixed. You have national experts and internationals. Those are usually people with high integrity and legal ethics. And usually the composition so far, drawing conclusions from Albania and drawing conclusions from Moldova, we can say those bodies are filled with legal experts, individuals who have a deep understanding of the law, experienced judges such as Herman, seasoned, who have a practical knowledge of the judicial system and they can use. Also ethics specialists. We have also civil society representatives, because civil society must be present throughout the process. If you decide to go on vetting, it's a national consultative process, which means that civil society must be included into the decision making, because they're going to make legal analysis. They're going to report basically on every aspect from the social life. Those individuals possess the external perspective, and of course they will enhance the transparency of the entire process. And of course, we have the independent observers, which are represented from international organizations, who are going to observe and monitor the entire process of vetting, monitor potential human rights violations. This is very good. This is, for the composition of the council, of course, those people must have a high ethical and it must be people of integrity. Usually it's 50-50 internationals plus locals. What is much interesting in this, and this is a conflicting opinion in the Venice Commission, but Ukraine has the most interesting example, as you will see in our guidebook, in our guidelines. Ukraine are video streaming their sessions from the councils. Basically, they're video streaming the interviews with the candidates. I see in Moldova they're also publishing they're very active in publishing the records, basically, of public hearings of the candidates for high judicial and high prosecutorial councils. And therefore they are adhering to the principle of transparency, so to say. And that is basically my answer.
Thank you so much, Andrei. It is really very interesting to hear your opinion, as you are have practical experience on these aspects. And as you mentioned, really Georgia has faced this situation, and we have a challenge now to how to conduct vetting. For us, it's really interesting to hear these differences of pre-vetting, vetting, and all these processes, as it's first time that Venice Commission and the European Council has mentioned this vetting towards Georgia, and this process has begun in Georgia, and and we are trying to find all the ways which will be relevant for this process. Thank you so much. And before we go to the answers and questions, I will have one question to all of our panelists. As we have the recommendations from Venice Commission to make the comprehensive reform of High Council of Justice, how do you think, how can the High Council of Justice be reformed to align with the recommendations from the Venice Commission? What is the best example of the High Council of Justice?
Okay, Herman, I leave this to you, and Greg, please do. I am the youngest one. I'll go last. Thank you.
Clever one. Well,
then I'm afraid I have to go first because I'm the oldest, but then
Nonsense.
It's I think it's, of course, it's always, I'm always hesitant to talk about your own experience and saying this is the best way to do it. But I must say that the more I've been working in Moldova with the project of the pre-vetting of the Superior Council of Magistrates and Prosecutors, I actually like that approach a lot. And one of the elements also is because of the fact that people can voluntarily present themselves as a candidate for the position of being elected in the Superior Council. There's no obligation there. People will not lose their jobs. If they fail the evaluation, they can no longer be a candidate, but they can continue to be the judge or the prosecutor that they are. It provides the opportunity of actually seeing people with high levels of integrity to get into a system like that. It also has not a huge impact on the functioning of the judiciary as such. Because the rest of the judiciary goes on with its own work. The only downside, and of course Vladislav knows about that a lot as well, is that who controls this process and what kind of mechanisms are there in place. And what we have seen in Moldova is that once the Commission has taken a number of decisions, and the majority of the judges and prosecutors that went through our process failed the evaluation, then roughly nearly 30 people appealed with the Supreme Court of Justice. Supreme Court then took quite radical decisions. I think I'm entitled to say that, and basically annulled most of our decisions, sent them back for resumed evaluation, and coming up with legal reasoning that, to put it mildly, at least was very creative. And it causes a lot of trouble, and we're still in the process of bringing about new decisions there. But it shows the weakness as to, if you see that there are serious shortcomings in your judicial system, where to start and how, as we mentioned at the very beginning, how to make sure that when the empire strikes back, you still have the opportunity to make sure that the process is going to be successful. Those decisions by the Supreme Court were a huge setback for the process. I think we're working incredibly hard to push that back. In the meantime, there has been a new panel composed by the Supreme Court, and the first signs we see over there are way more positive. But yeah, if you want to get this process started, it's not only about the council. It has to be a bit wider, and it has to focus also on the leadership positions, most important positions, Constitutional Court, Supreme Court, etc. You cannot only do the High Council of Justice or the Superior Council of Magistracy. It has to be a bit further. But I think it is a good process. And at one point, I was talking to someone in Moldova. I said, you know what, maybe these kind of processes should simply focus on the top 200, 300 lawyers in the country, not more. Once those top 200 lawyers are clean, are good, the rest will follow. And maybe that is all you should do. Let's not go into the Albanian system where everyone goes through a long process of many years and huge interruptions. No, just focus on the top 200, 250 or something like that, and the rest will follow afterwards. That will be my recommendation of the approach that could work in Georgia as well.
Thank you very much, Herman. Thank you so much. Greg, please.
Oh, well, that comes as a surprise, I must say. Well, I can tell you that in my previous life, I was head of the office of a judicial council here in Poland, not here, back in Poland. Well, the Polish example may be shown as the best worst example. So what has been changed in Poland is that the judges, judicial members of the council, were no longer elected by their peers, by other judges, but where they changed the law, and they, meaning the government, and the judges started being elected by the parliament. The argumentation was that the parliament has support of the society. No, I mean, yes, they have the support for the society, but if you look anywhere, CCJE, ENCJ, OSCE, ODIHR, everywhere, the standard is the judicial members of the judicial council should be elected by their peers. And this is like number one. Let us not forget that the judicial councils it's not the only model of the administration of justice. You may have countries which do not have judicial councils at all, like Germany, like Austria, Czech Republic, and the judiciary functions there as well. You have the Scandinavian model where there is a court administration, there is no council. But it seems that so far it's like with the democracy. Maybe it's not the best system, but no one has invented a better one. So there are councils which function properly, like in the Netherlands. There are councils which do not function properly. And then you should look for what is wrong. Because except of the fact that those judges should be elected by their peers, this election should be merit-based. We are searching for the best people, for the best in judicial administration. We are not searching for the people who will create a very effective net, because then you get this corporatism, which you will find in different international documents. And of course, as the old saying goes, laws and institutions are only as good as people in charge of them. If you don't make sure that you put the right people in the judicial council, then the judicial council will not function properly. And then you will create clique, clan, or whatever you name it, and it will not function. Then, as for ideal model, because that was your question, I must tell you, without knowing the local legal background, local circumstances, I dare not say. I'll give you an example. Last year, I was an expert for the Council of Europe for Armenia, preparing possible ways of improving the functioning of bailiffs, court executors. And I prepared a presentation about how much the privatization of this profession helped in different countries, helped the efficiency of court execution. And after that, I heard, Greg, that's very interesting. Yes, we know it, but you have to remember that here in Armenia, the bailiffs, they wear uniforms. They are, so they look like policemen, let's say, or soldiers. And still, the 85 or more percent of the court judgments need to be executed in force. Just imagine what will happen if you send a guy in a suit instead of a uniform. And I understand it fully. You've got to remember about the not only legal background, but about the society. So I don't know what would be the best model for Georgia, but I think that the way the members are elected and on which basis is just a minimum starting point. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregor. Of course, it's relevant and it's very useful. And without information about the local situation, you cannot decide whether this judicial council must be functioned. And also, I think that really for Georgia, even today and after these recommendations, we have begin here negotiations about if we need a High Council of Justice. Maybe that countries who don't have this model, they maybe function more effectively. And these negotiations also are now very popular in Georgia. Let's see how we will lead this process. And I see the hands raised up for the questions. And first I will...
sorry,
Andre, sorry, if you want to add...
Just to add something what Greg said.
We have a very limited time. I'm just looking for these hands that to also to have some questions. So of course we will be very
short clarification.
Yes, of course.
You have the newest guidelines on judicial independence by ODIHR, which were published. And basically, when you see the composition of judicial councils in Europe, it's mostly based on the principles: have more judges within them. That's the principle. Have other members, but more judges. Now that it has demonstrated that concept is flawed. Basically, that's what the new recommendations of the judicial accountability and judicial councils are saying. That model is flawed. And they say now, okay, abandon this principle, and then other people can be, except for public prosecutors, and they don't want them in the Judicial Council for some reason, but you can put also members from the CSO, you can put members from the academic community, you can put other legal practitioners. So basically, as you can see, that the entire model of Judicial Council is changing. And however, what I forgot to mention, when you want to, if you're considering a vetting, first you have to say what is your legitimate aim. And if you, what is your legitimate aim? To get the judiciary, to rid the judiciary out of corruption. Okay, so basically, if you go with pre-vetting, as Herman's commission, you have to ask yourself, and do not be afraid to ask this question: is that tribunal by law? Is that in line with the principles of European Court of Human Rights? And it is. In Luca versus Romania, that is the case. That says in order for one ad hoc body to be recognized as a tribunal, it must have clear definition of the mandate and how the members are selected and the accountability measures of all those members in place. So if Georgia decides to go strictly to pre-vetting, which I will share my personal opinion, it should be reading the other reports of Georgia. Especially country progress reports from the European Commission. It should, and I believe that that is the type of vetting without too much fuss. It's two councils. You will vet the candidates of those councils and let the process to self-repeat with after the vetting you will let the regular accountability mechanism to take over. That is just one thing, and I'm looking forward to getting questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrei. I will ask Vladislav to ask a question to our panelists, please.
Good evening, Agriti from Moldova. If I may, I don't think I have questions. I would rather to come with some comments, very short one and targeted. On justice, I'm coming from Moldova. We followed how the pre-vetting and vetting is progressing in Moldova. So first, think of political will. If you don't have a genuine political will to have an independent judiciary, then don't start it. Otherwise, you'll end up with a controlled judiciary after the exercise, and no one wants it. In Moldova, there was a genuine political will. The politicians that have more than 60% of votes in the parliament don't want to control the judiciary, which is rare for our region. Second, in order to go that way, you need a critical situation in the judiciary, meaning that your measures call to preserve the independence, accountability of judges don't work, and there is no perspectives to work in the near future. That's why the pre-vetting is called to reset the system in order to work afterwards. Third, you need a green light from the Venice Commission at least. Without Venice Commission, you will not move forward. Otherwise, it will be seen as a sort of a disruption of the judiciary, and it will take long. It took Moldova 1.5 years to put the legislation in place with the green lighting of the Venice Commission. Third, you'll need an independent body that will be in charge of that, and Herman is a part of it. We have 3 internationals proposed by internationals, by development partners, and we have 3 nationals appointed by a qualified majority in the parliament, meaning that the politicians, even now Moldovan politicians, don't control the committee. They are paid by international. Secretariat is has no links whatsoever with the government. The only link is probably information that they get, but they can gather information independently. And next is it takes time. It takes time, and think about political cycles, because you want to start it and end it in a rather same political context. If you start it under one parliament and then the new parliament or government comes and then the next government or parliament doesn't like the idea, it will be stopped in between, and then you'll have a mess in the judiciary. That's important. That's why think about that. Next is think about the way to appeal, because Herman was saying about access to court, which is one of the criteria which shall be in the legislation against the decisions of the vetting or pre-vetting bodies. Who will be dealing with them? Because on critical issues for the judiciary, the old guard will stay strong. And what we had in Moldova is the Supreme Court of Justice basically invalidating how much? 70% of your decisions, Herman, in one day.
Yeah.
In one day.
The empire struck back, that was for sure. Yeah, 21 decisions out of 27. Yeah.
In one day. And think about that, all them annulled, everything is starting from scratch. So think about who will be the judges hearing appeal. For pre-vetting, we had a very specific situation. Now we move to vetting. And in the case of vetting, it is mentioned expressly in the law that the appeals can be heard only by judges that pass the vetting. If you didn't pass the vetting, you cannot hear appeals against the vetting. As a sort of a safeguard that this is not happening, and the ones that passed through it are already accommodated and they understand that it is nothing undoable for a fair judge to comply with. Next is transparency. I understand Venice Commission has its odds on privacy, but Herman will confirm that the old system will fight back, and they will fight back with quite unpleasant remarks and attacks. And the committee cannot reply, cannot fight back, simply because the committee shall stay impartial and shall look impartial. That's why transparency of the procedures is one of the tools to accredit the trust in the process, which is critical for any solution. And next is comprehensive approach. Think about vetting. When it comes to dysfunctions in the judiciary or corruption, it's not only about judges, it's also about prosecutors, it's about other key anti-corruption bodies. So if you want to get rid of anything and you want to recess this, you should touch everyone from the circle. Next, think ahead. What I mean, we have the pre-vetting, which is the bodies of self-management of judges and prosecutors. Then we have Supreme Court, and then we have the other key positions from the judiciary. With the Supreme Court, before the law entered into force, 20 out of 25 sitting judges resigned in 2 or 3 days. So imagine 20 of 25 judges of the Supreme Court resigned at once. And then the other 2 a bit later after invalidating Herman's decisions.
It's exactly.
So think about that. meaning that there will be vacancies, and I estimate that there will be a high number of judges that will resign. And the question is whether you let them go or you'll fight them. Do you have strength to fight them? If you do, then think about it, but it will delay the process. You can just opt for letting them go and then think how you cope with them when they're out of the system. But you will need vacancies. You will need to fill in vacancies. I estimate half of the judges and prosecutors will not go for it. They will either quit or don't comply with requirements and be dismissed. And then where you take the new specialists from. So this shall be thought ahead even before the reform is very deep progressing. And next, what I think, two things. First, digitalization of justice. In order to cope for this crisis period, you should digitalize to the maximum what you can, because this will facilitate a lot the crisis period. And last, want you or not, justice is about people. You need champions. Who are those champions? You should think ahead, empower them, because it's not very pleasant to take a stance against the very powerful old guard. And that are usually judges that are now and prosecutors that are now in the system and that would like to probably take the leadership and move forward the system. Thank you. Sorry for being so long.
Thank you so much, Vladislav. It's very interesting, your comments, of course, but in Georgia, I don't think that we have a political will of the vetting, and I really interesting, and I want to ask also our presenters, what can they recommend to the civil societies or other groups who are in this process and who are trying to make their effort to begin this process? We can, if we don't begin this process, we don't begin to negotiate on these issues. So what can we do?
Oh, yeah, that is a difficult one. I do agree with Vladislav that the experience in Moldova has shown that strong political support from President, Parliament, Minister of Justice, and whatever was incredibly important for our work. And there was still a desire for us, of course, to go faster than what they, from a political agenda perspective, wanted us to go for. I think if there was one issue that we had with the government, it was the pace of our work. But we have always been saying, you know, you have to do this right, you have to do this in great detail, and you have to do this against very high standards. Otherwise, it will not work. I can see that in a situation where the government would be less supportive, let's try to be diplomatic here, that it could still be possible to do the work, but it will be incredibly difficult because you do need, as I mentioned also in my introduction before, you do need the support from a wide variety of sources to make your work be successful. If the law that needs to be adopted in order to create a pre-vetting or a vetting commission has to set out the powers of that commission. If a government who doesn't want it and doesn't want this process establishes such a law, the problem may be that the powers of that commission are so limited that it will be a fake exercise and that no real results can come out. So what will be important is, and that's where civil society has a huge role to play, that even if a government were to be less than 100% committed, there has to be a huge push for making sure that the law can be effective. And then you need the people in that commission and also in the secretariat to be willing to work there. Even in Moldova, we have seen that some of our staff were sometimes hesitant to work because, of course, it's a very delicate exercise, etc. If there were to be a political setting where in which the work would not be so strongly supported, it could lead to staff being extremely hesitant, or to people being extremely hesitant to work for such a commission, and also for national members. For international members, it's less of an issue. You come in, you go out, etc. Not a big problem. But for the national members, for the national staff, knowing that you can work in a safe environment is crucial. So yes, these kind of issues have to be worked on, and it requires a lot of public attention. So publicity, push, I think that's a major thing in my view.
Thank you so much, Herman. I see Kaha wants to ask a question. Please, Kaha.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kaha Tsikarishvili. I'm a member of the group of independent lawyers. Thank you very much for this interesting discussion. It's very vital. It's very useful because this is something which has not been experienced in Georgia, and we don't actually have any practical experience. We just read from books. And it's very nice to hear directly from you guys, from practitioners, about the vetting. My question is, now I have just a few questions. My first question would be about the appointment, defects of the appointment. Well, usually in a democratic system, the judges are appointed for life, and they are appointed by a healthy procedure, checking their competence, integrity, their assets. So that's why the international standards, they make a lot of focus on the appointment of the judge. And this is very important. If you appoint judge properly, then you don't need the vetting anymore. I mean, probably if you are appointing judges in a proper manner, then we don't need vetting for a long time. I mean, how can a white sheep can become a black sheep? And unless something extraordinary happens, the white sheep is going to remain a white sheep. I mean, probably Herman will agree with me. So probably the problem comes from the appointment. So we are appointing the black sheeps at the initial stage, and we have a problem about the appointment. We are not filtering well. So my question is, what was the problem of appointment in your countries? What were the major defects of appointment? And why did you have the black sheeps in the first place to come to the necessity of vetting? Mm-hmm. My second question would be about the banking, the access to the banking data. I mean, how can you access to the judges or judges' relatives' banking data, like, their transactions? How is that possible in a constitutional or legal, under the constitutional framework? And my third question was about, my third question was about the scope of the vetting. Is scope of the vetting in Moldova, in Albania, only limited by financial checking or checking of any other problems of integrity? For example, what if the judge was appointed by nepotism? He was not, there is no problem of corruption, like financial money. There's no problem of money or illegal asset. But the judge was appointed by nepotism. The judge was promoted by nepotism. I mean, mm-hmm. Can you identify that by vetting? So thank you. These are basically my questions.
Thank you, Kaha. I think Andrei wants to answer, and Vladislav wants to also make comments or ask a question. Okay, Andrei first, and
thank you so much, Keta. I love when people are asking 7 questions at once. It's really time budgeting. It is very good. Allow me just to say that when it comes to the appointment of judges, that is why the Venice Commission is using this harsh terminology. It's called judicial corporatism. It is not about the black sheeps or white sheeps or gray sheeps. It is about judicial corporatism, means not captured judiciary, but captured high judicial councils, high prosecutorial councils. That means only their people who are in line with the opinion of the judicial clan are getting promoted. And if the judicial clan is corrupted, there is not a democratic judicial clan, but it's only negative context. But if it is corrupted, only those judges will go ahead. And you have the context of captured judiciary, something we had in North Macedonia. Also, I like to, when it comes to selection, vetting especially does not depends on the type of vetting, however, but pre-vetting, as in the context of Georgia, doesn't require any constitutional amendments. That is only for the Albanian part. The only standards that needs to be followed is to have an adequate appeal body, adequate monitoring body, and adequate vetting commission. And when it comes, they don't check nepotism. There is no, maybe in the questionnaire Herman knows better, but there is no, are you employed thanks to your relative? Check if yes, or check if no. No, there is no such question. However, they go thorough assessment. Assessment means go through banking records, tax records, whether or not you paid your taxes, whether or not you are a person of integrity, how do you conduct yourself in your private sphere. Moldova, they didn't check for professional competencies. However, in Albania, they did. They also go through previous judgment to see whether or not the judges basically judgments are in line with the human rights principles, with the governing laws. They're doing thorough assessment. And it's a lengthy process. In Georgia, in my opinion, the Venice Commission said first try alternative measures, which are regular accountability mechanisms, which currently exist. But they went with the softer version of vetting, which is pre-vetting. In pre-vetting means, okay, you just go against the judicial clans, not against the judges, because if you change and you cleanse them, oh my God, I'm using the word as cleanse, but it's that lustratio on Latin. If you clean the judicial councils and councils of the public prosecution, if you put people of competence there, people who do not have allegiance to the executive or any other private interest, then they will clean the judiciary of all the bad apples. And basically, that is the theoretical concept of vetting. And of course, as Goethe said, theory is rose and the practice is gray. When it comes to practical implication, and this goes to Keta's, especially Keta is very much involved with this, and she asked a question on the Silly Institute previous discussion, the role of the civil society sector. It is indispensable. Let's put it bluntly, it is indispensable. And if Georgia opts for vetting, and I believe that if Democratic Index or Georgia organization, if its Democracy Index is involved, it will make the process much more transparent, much more thorough. They will offer the legal knowledge. They're excellent lawyers. And they will offer transparency. And of course, they will offer safeguards. They will offer something to the assessees, people undergoing vetting. They will monitor cases of potential injustice. The commission, regardless of how good the members are, may make mistakes. They're human, of course. And if such a mistake is made, the NGO is here to report on it. And the NGO is here to document. NGO is here to be more transparent to the public. And most importantly, the public is aware of vetting only through the NGO. The public does not have a degree in law. They don't understand what vetting is. They know yes or no, corrupt or not corrupt. And that is the most important issue here, to communicate the process to the public in a very much transparent way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrei. Maya has shared with us very important news that we have got the candidate status. Just 5 minutes, we have this information, and I want to congratulate all Georgians that we fight a lot for this. All this group of independent lawyers, Democracy Index Georgia, we have really decisive role in when we were in negotiations, in the working groups, and for us, for Georgia, it's really very good news and really big achievement. Thank you. And I am really very happy. So I see that Vladislav also wants to add something. Please, the floor is yours.
So Ketivan, congratulations. And here the political will may come, because the vetting and pre-vetting are one of the conditionalities for opening the EU-Moldova negotiations, which we just received with Ukraine. So if you want to put in place, try to talk to EU delegation, to Venice Commission, prepare the concepts, and probably if it transforms into sort of a conditionality from the EU, then it may get easier with political will for vetting. But coming back to Kaha's question about white sheep, well, any white sheep may get dirty. And this is what
not if properly white. I mean, not if fully white from the beginning. I mean, even the Jesus Christ was tempted once, but could resist to the temptation.
We should lead with biblical quotes.
What I wanted to say is that we are not talking here about the dysfunction in selection of judges. When it comes to full vetting, it's not only about selection. If it's about selection, then you don't need vetting. You just solve the problem with your bodies that are in charge of selection and promotion of judges. Vetting is about corporatism, which is blended with endemic corruption, where no one understands, and dysfunction of the agencies in charge of ensuring proper administration of the judiciary. It's not only about selection. So that's one thing. Second, what's the scope of vetting and nepotism? Professional. What's the concept of Moldova? So we have pre-vetting, where you have the highest self-management bodies in place. And there is and if the candidates for these bodies don't pass the pre-vetting, they are not dismissed. They just cannot run for the councils. But once the councils are created, then the vettings come into place, meaning that the judges and prosecutors that don't pass the vetting are dismissed and stripped of all social guarantees. That's the second part of it. But what you need there in the second part, you need their integrity in place. So you check through vetting their integrity, and then the professionalism is left to the body which is already clean, the Council for Judiciary. They will take care of their professionalism, because it's very hard to assess. It's time consuming, and I don't think that international experts will understand in nitty-gritty details the probably minor professional discrepancies that happen in practice, right? So this can be done by someone else. Integrity is most important. Once you have a non-corrupt judge in place with potential, that judge can learn, or prosecutor can learn, can endeavor professionally. And third is about nepotism. Well, I must admit that there were cases in Moldova where people have been appointed through nepotism, but they made a very good judge. So what's important, and Herman will say here, they looked 15 years back. With vetting, it's 12 years back. Anyways, you check the activity of a judge for 12 years. And if, yes, I must admit that the nomination or appointment was not perfect. But if in 12 years, there is nothing to criticize the person for, then probably he deserves to stay.
Yeah.
And the criteria for throwing out people from the system should be very clear and rather serious, because the Venice Commission will not accept authorizing throwing someone out for minor details.
Sorry, Vladislav, let me just one word. There is a lot of ex parte communication inside judiciary on specific cases. Judges, like, these mafia judges, rigging specific cases with their colleagues. And this type of ex parte communication on cases, it's very hard to discover. They won't talk about it. They won't talk about it. And so they will just stay silent. And how do we get rid of these kind of judges?
Herman probably may tell that we have a special criteria for that.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting question, and it goes also back to your previous question. The reality is that, yes, we as pre-vetting commission, we have the ethical integrity and we have the financial integrity. In reality, financial integrity is much easier to work on. It's much easier to find shortcomings than the ethical integrity. If you have, and as Vladislav was saying, if you can go back 15 years in bank accounts and whatever, then you do discover a lot. And it's also about, not only about the candidate, but also about the family members. And we simply went to the banks and saying, hey, wait a minute, We have the information from this particular person. Can you see those bank accounts or those bank transfers from abroad? Where did they come from? Whose name is annexed to that, etc.? That is the kind of information that you can ask. And we had actually the legislation on privacy was actually sort of pushed aside so that we can actually have access to that. That also means that you have to be extremely careful in your decisions, because you have to know that you were dealing often with privacy sensitive materials. And so we also are very keen not to provide too much details about that, but they did provide us a lot of information about the background and the functioning of people. But at the same time, also, I think a number of financial integrity issues also have an ethical aspect. We've had a few instances where candidates did not pay taxes. That, of course, is a financial issue, but it's also an ethical issue. As a judge, you better make sure that your tax claims and payments every year are in good shape. You cannot afford, as a judge, not to have that in place, and I know that for myself in Holland, I better be extremely careful making sure that my tax payments are absolutely 100% solid. That's my obligation as a judge, and that is what every judge should feel. And we have had situations that in Moldova that we ask questions to candidates saying, hey, wait a minute, you declared this income to us, but you didn't declare it to the tax authorities. Did you pay taxes? And then people started paying taxes the week after we asked them questions. The Supreme Court allowed for that and say, hey, there's no problem. They pay taxes. Well, actually, I think there is a problem, and I don't think it is ethical. But these were the judges that actually walked out a few days after they took those decisions. But so financial and ethical is not necessarily completely separate. One strengthens the other and back. Yeah, I think these were the comments that I would like to make to your questions. I hope I answered all your questions. Yeah.
Okay.
If I may add one thing.
Okay.
We can go on for hours.
Yes.
It's a very complex thing, the criteria for vetting. So basically what we have 4 criteria for full vetting. First is about your incomes don't match with your assets, and there is a discrepancy of 10,000 euros. So it's more than 10,000 euros, you're dismissed. Second, if you didn't pay taxes and the income from which you should have been paying taxes is 30,000 euros. So if it's more, you are dismissed. And then there are 2 more criteria. And one of the criteria is about decisions not applied yet in practice by the committees, but it is still there. So let's assume, I'm sure that 90% of people will be caught somewhat on financial side of it, but some others may not take bribes, but they take abusive decisions.
Yeah.
For political considerations, because they wanted a better career and some other things. And with that, there is a safeguard criteria, meaning a behavior or an act which is incompatible with the status of a judge. So ex parte communication, for example, which is purely unethical. If they talk about the solutions of the cases, I think based on that criteria, a person might be disqualified. And second is about that specific judge or prosecutor took an arbitrary decision, meaning a decision that has nothing in common with the law. And this is obvious for everyone. It's not about how justified is that decision. It's just that the decision has nothing in common with the law and spirit of the law. But that criteria, last one, was never applied in practice yet. But it is still there in case there is a need for such an assessment.
Okay, thank you very much, Vladislav. Unfortunately, we have not much time today because it's really very interesting topic. We can discuss this topic for hours, but unfortunately, our speakers also have to leave, as they are, as I mentioned, the leaders and in the in the center of the events. And so I want to first of all express my gratitude to Andrei, who gathered these brilliant speakers today, and for his effort in this process. Of course, Herman, thank you so much for sharing your very practical experience with us and for being with us today. Thank you so much. Greg unfortunately have left. He was hurry, and thanks Greg also for sharing his experience, and of course we have a lot of questions about is vetting a response to a failed judicial reforms, is vetting to clean judiciary of corrupt judges, or what is this vetting to understand. But from this discussion, I think all of us, all participants, we have a very new vision and new information about this process. And I think that we will continue to work on this recommendation of Venice Commission, European Council, as we have now the candidate status. I think that this process will be more active. And of course, with this knowledge, we will have it will be more easy to participate in this process. And thank you so much. Thank you all our participants, all members for being with us. And I have also very good news that our project will last next year. We will have more discussions, and I will be very glad to see all in our next events. And thank you very much.
I just want to make one brief, I just want to comment Keta and Eka. You will read country chapters in the guidelines. It's not just general guidelines on the process, but also the part 2 of the guidelines is country chapters, country by country. And they were gracious enough, both Keta and Eka, to provide us a country chapter on Georgia, which we as a board, we decided to include it. And other countries who went all the types of vetting. So you will have the opportunity to read all those experiences. And I would like to thank you again for having us. It's a pleasure to be cooperating with you. And of course, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was an honor to have you, amazing speakers today. And thank you everyone for participation, and looking forward to see you on our next discussions. Bye. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hey, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.